Hello there, and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I am your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, the founder of Utrema Limited, and my background is in ornamental horticulture. I did my PhD on flowering in rhododendron, and I really got into plants and plant science because I was really enthusiastic about houseplants and bonsai when I was a kid. I was a member of the Wirral Bonsai Society near Liverpool. And so ornamental horticulture is sort of my passion when I started off in plant science and then diversified into food crops and medicinal crops. And eventually, after I became a plant scientist and an academic at universities, it was far too much like hard work being a lecturer. So I started my own company making biostimulants. And so I'm always drawn back to ornamental horticulture, even if we don't actually sell that much product into ornamental horticulture. And the reason I'm talking about that is because at the recent trip I went to at Growy, there's a big vertical farm. They're obviously growing leafy veg and microgreens for human consumption. They had like a timeline of the different types of crops they could grow in their facility and that were interested to them. And they were like, in the next few years, we'll look at berry crops and vine crops and eventually medicinal crops and even cosmetics. And even at the end was mushrooms. But nowhere was it listed ornamental crops, flowers and things like this. And I thought that was crazy because we were in Amsterdam, the home of, the world centre of ornamental horticulture. And they hadn't even considered that. Well, they might have considered it, but they've thrown it out. And for me, that would be like, I would definitely go to ornamentals before I would go to mushrooms or even cosmetics, because cosmetics, you'll have a few meetings with some cosmetic companies and they'll say, oh yeah, we're really interested because it could increase our bioactive content and stuff like that. But they're actually just looking for a good marketing story because cosmetics is mainly marketing. Whereas ornamentals, there's a real opportunity. And I think I've discovered the best ornamental to grow hydroponically. If you wanted to get into ornamentals, there's obviously a niche there because no one else is growing, certainly not indoors, ornamentals really. So roses might be grown hydroponically, chrysanthemums, things like this. But if we're talking indoor cultivation, hydroponics, I think I've got a new species that particularly could be good. And that is Iris tectorum. So check Iris tectorum out. Go on. It's a purple iris and it's from Japan and also Korea and China, as many plants are. Debate about where it's actually native to, but it's a beautiful purple iris. And the reason I believe that it would be ideal for hydroponics is because it grows on the roofs of houses in China but mainly Japan. And I thought this was amazing because it can be planted there where there's hardly any nutrients and the water availability will be, very variable, and it can withstand these sorts of conditions without any soil. It is already being grown virtually hydroponically because it's without soil. And that's what on the roof, a thatched roof made of reed, that's where it would grow. I'm also interested in this plant because I'm always interested in when people claim we don't need ornamental horticulture. So like famously, Chairman Mao tried to get rid of all ornamental horticulture, make everyone's gardens into farms. Same in Cuba, tried to get rid of gardens and put in something called organoponics, which is not hydroponics. It's just growing food in your back garden, really. And even back in like famines in ancient times, the emperors would decree that all the land has to be cultivated for rice and other staple food crops. And it was illegal in Japan during famines for land to be used for growing flowers because they could see no viable use for it. And obviously we know that it's extremely important for people's welfare, psychology, mental health, and just for society and culture. You have to have art, and ornamental horticulture is an art form. And so they grew them on their roofs, which were not considered land. There's also conjecture, but people saying that women would grow it on the roofs. That was the area they had control of for hair dye, face powder for geishas. But that's controversial and not really been proven. The other reason that Iris tectorum, also known as the roof iris, is of interest is that there are loads of interesting chemicals in it. So there are let's have a look, iristotectarine, which I think is an flavonoid. There is a triterpenoid chemical, so probably some sort of steroid in the roots. There's a cytotoxic properties that could be used for treating cancer. The rhizomes have been found to contain isoflavones. What other sorts of chemicals? Loads and loads of different chemicals. Loads of studies showing anti-cancer properties, neuroprotective properties of the isolates. It's a potentially toxic plant, but that's because it's used in Chinese medicine. And so, show me the medicine that has no side effects and I'll show you the medicine that doesn't work. So being a medicinal plant, it must have powerful chemistry in there. And this is not an edible plant. This is not something that should be consumed if grown hydroponically, but is of potential for pharmaceutical companies for those compounds. And if you're going to grow it, probably best to grow it hydroponically because it loves being grown in inert media and fed with very little water. It's also extremely tolerant to stress, and it can be grown outside in the UK in a pot, so frost resistant as well. So a fantastic species there that, would be a good one to start if you're going to think of a new novel ornamental plant to grow hydroponically, because it's take a lot of punishment. It's also reported that irises grow on thatch roofs in Normandy in France, and I've never seen that, but it's there's a number of different sources that say that. Normally when I'm going through Normandy, I'm rushing to get somewhere else, either in France or in the Low Countries or Germany, so I don't stop off in many villages. So if you live in Normandy, if you know anyone in Normandy, or you've been on holiday to Normandy and you've seen irises growing on thatch roofs, then let me know. Be interesting to know what species they use. I would imagine it is a different species to the Japanese and Chinese and Korean roof irises. Also, if you live in Korea, do you have irises on your roofs in Korea, or is it just Japan and in certain parts of China traditionally where it's done? So really interesting. If you're in North Korea, then do get in touch. Do you grow irises on your roofs in North Korea, or do you grow Kim Sung-gilia, the orchids and begonias that are famous for the deer leader and things like this? So yeah, be really interesting to know what you grow on your roofs there. If you do have thatch roofs, which I'm sure you do in your small villages outside of Pyongyang. Okay, on that bizarre twist to the hermit state of North Korea, I'll say zaijian. That's goodbye in Chinese. I don't know what goodbye is in Korean, Japanese. What is it in au revoir in French? There you go. Whistle stop round the world tour about irises growing on roofs, but with massive potential for growing in hydroponically. Can you even use reed and it's not straw from the field, is it? It's reed from marshes. Can you use that as a hydroponic medium even? Interesting to think. It's long lasting. It doesn't degrade. It doesn't decompose. It sits on roofs for many years. So yeah, another potential grow media we could try out in the laboratory. Okay, that's been great. If you found this at all interesting, then please do leave an Apple Podcast review because it helps tremendously. If you're listening on any other platform, chill out and relax. It doesn't help tremendously if you leave a review. Just listening helps us. Okay, and if you want to check out any of the weird and amazing products that Utrema offer, then check out utrema.co.uk. And if you can't spell Utrema, just look up wasabi, because Utrema is the Latin name for wasabi, which does grow in Japan as well, but not on roofs because it needs constant stream of nice, cool water in its growing media. All right, and never ever dry out. Never let your wasabi dry out. That's me babbling on. I'll end this podcast now. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.